Okay guys, we are in the basement shop and we have a big project to do today. I've been putting this off for a really long time, but I'm in kind of crisis mode with my wood storage. So I have wood all over the place. The floor is completely covered. If it's not wood, it's some other junk, and there's like no space to even walk around down here anymore. So we're gonna fix that today. I want to make kind of like a cart version of a wood storage rack. I did look at some plans. I didn't land on any of them, so I'm just gonna kind of feel it out as I go. I'm kind of cheap, so I really want to use the wood that I have laying around. I don't want to go and buy like a couple sheets of plywood. I know it would be really beautiful, but I just don't want to do that. So we're gonna try to make do with what we have. This isn't gonna be glamorous, but it's hopefully gonna be functional and hopefully it doesn't fall apart. So let's see how it turns out. Now, one thing that I have is, you know, I initially bought this quite a while ago on Amazon. This is the Bora Wall Rack for wood, and I was really hoping that I could just install it on the wall like a lot of woodworkers do and just make this a seamless process, but I'm a little too scared to install it on the wall in my basement and be able to trust myself that I can hang it securely. So I'm gonna also incorporate this into my wood storage cart and use this for kind of like the wood that's gonna be stored horizontally. All right, so let's see how this bad boy turns out.
Okay, we're gonna start off with a quick clean of the basement. I have a small space, I have limited area to do this type of large project, so I'm gonna be doing it on my uneven, unlevel concrete floor in my basement. So we're starting off with a portion of a sheet of 1/2-inch plywood. This is repurposed and I've been storing it for a while. It's not perfectly straight. It's like has a slight warp to it, which is kind of getting me off on a bit of the wrong foot with this project, but I'm cutting a little bit off. So my cart ended up being about 6 feet in length and about 2 feet wide. So now I'm taking these 2x6s, again, using wood that I had laying around my shop. The 2x6s, again, I think one of them at least was like a little bit cupped / warped. So you can see here that I'm already kind of having some issues with a level, straight, even, nice build, but I'm pushing forward with the project. So I am attaching these 2x6s to each other using pocket holes. So here I am drilling all of the pocket holes using my Craig pocket hole jig, and then I'm attaching it. So I have this 2x6 frame which is going on the bottom of my partial sheet of plywood. Initially I put in 8 pocket holes on this side, which was like overkill, so then I just went down to 4 on the other side because I was also running out of pocket hole screws. So now we have the frame and I am just looking at it. It's not perfectly straight, if you can tell. So this is, again, you know, I didn't come up with a perfectly, you know, straight / level on the ground end product, but we'll get to that. So now I have done some countersink holes on the top of my plywood and I'm screwing the plywood to the base. Now I'm attaching my wheels to the bottom of the plywood. I had to use screws and washers for this, and I actually didn't have enough washers to put all 4 screws in each of the wheels. Because I didn't design it in the right way where I could use the bolts and the nuts and bolts that came with the wheels. So I had to just improvise here. Now it's rolling pretty smoothly, but you can see now in this clip that it is not level with the ground. One wheel is pretty high off the ground, like probably a good 1.5 inches, I would say. The concrete floor isn't level, but also my work isn't level and straight and accurate either. Anyways, I couldn't figure it out. I tried to fix it, but I decided to keep pushing on. So here I am cutting all of my 2x4s, which is I'm going to be using for the back frame. Now I just kind of improvised on this one and I ended up cutting them a little bit weird. So the front part is probably about 6 inches taller than the back. So I didn't cut both of my 2x4s into equal pieces. I'm not sure why I did that, but I needed it to be a certain height for the front so that I can attach my Bora metal rack, and then I ended up having only smaller pieces left over, and I didn't want to use fresh 2x4s, so I just worked with what I had. So it's a little bit of an interesting style, but it actually works because then it created kind of like a shelf in the back where I can store other pieces of wood as well. So you'll see that in the finished product. So now I'm attaching all of the 2x4s. I've marked it out, and I'm attaching them also with pocket screws into the plywood base. Now, you'll see as I continue to move along that I kind of forgot that I didn't have a 2x6 in the middle area of my cart that these pocket hole screws would be going into. So I screwed it in, realizing that I'm only screwing into 1/2-inch plywood, and so I had to take a quick pause and then add a few more brace pieces in the middle here, so that I would have some meat for my pocket hole screws to go into. So I'm continuing to attach my 2x4s. So I had 10 in total, 2 rows of 5 that are, I would say they're about probably 6 to 8 inches from the back row to the front row. Now I'm unpacking all of the material, the hardware for the Bora wood storage rack. This was pretty smooth to put together. You just have to put in these screws, and then the little legs / shelves the shelves just slide onto the metal bars. Very easy to do. And as I mentioned, I already had this, so I wanted to definitely incorporate it into the build, and it actually ended up working out really well versus trying to figure out how to engineer this type of thing made out of wood. So now I'm attaching the Bora rack to my 2x4s. It ended up being a little bit wider apart than I wanted it to be. It would have probably been a little bit more ideal for my Bora rack to be a little bit closer together. I was shooting for about 5 feet apart, but I ended up being about like 5.5, closer to 6 feet. But it works because I usually use 8-foot lumber, so it works out, but I just have to be a little bit more strategic for shorter pieces. Now, I had these little brackets here that I'm attaching. I had these on hand, so I decided to use 2 of them for the 2 end pieces. And again, this is where I mentioned that my front 2x4s are taller than my back ones, so I'm kind of creating this little shelf, which is gonna be a storage space, but it's also adding support to these 2 rows of 2x4. So I'm attaching this, and for this I used, again, a 2x6 for this little shelf piece. I just was trying to make it as secure and stable as possible without going too crazy with the build. So I'm just attaching my 2x6 in between the 2x4s, and I guess now that I can see that I'm attaching this 2x6 in between them, I realize that, you know, the space between these 2 boards is obviously 5.5 inches. So we have a nice little shelf in the back. Now, if you use full sheets of plywood or anything like that, which I don't, I can't even fit them into my basement, but those wouldn't fit in this little plywood rack. I usually use the 2-foot by 4-foot pieces of plywood, if anything, so those will fit the long side going down in this little rack. So I'm finally got the build ready to go. Now I'm cleaning out this space where I had all of my luggage. Not luggage, what am I talking about luggage? Wood stored on this rack, which I actually had this like makeshift rack. I got these free pieces of particle board on Facebook Marketplace that I created this rack when I first started woodworking, and I've been using it. It's worked okay, but it's just everything got so jumbled up in there. So I'm happy to get that out of the way. Now I am rolling in my wood storage rack. It looks big in this space, but it's good. Still not perfectly even on the ground, but I just put the brake on and it's working out for now. And I figure that once I get the load of all of the wood on it, that it will kind of, hopefully that will help it to straighten out on the bottom. So I'm putting all my little scrap pieces of plywood in the back little plywood storage area, and now I'm loading up all of my shelves. This is such a nice feeling. Every shelf or every size of wood has its own shelf, so I can have things very organized. It's just so easy to know exactly where I need to look when I'm looking for the different sizes of wood. And I do cycle through a lot of wood. I use probably this amount of wood that you're gonna see in this video. Like every 1 or 2 weeks, I'm bringing in a new load of wood. So this stuff isn't gonna be stored here for long. It's gonna be a constant rotating cycle. And again, my Bora rack was a little bit wider apart than I thought, or than I initially wanted. So I have to just make sure my 8-foot pieces are on the bottom and then the smaller pieces can go on the top.
All right, so the build is done. I think it went pretty well. Definitely a few mistakes. It's not super stable, but it has a lot of wood on it and it doesn't seem to be falling apart yet. Definitely some learning lessons with this project. Overall, I'm happy with it. I can spread out the wood so it's at least easier to access. I think I'll continue to play around a little bit with how I organize it, and I'd like to figure out a way to get more scraps on here, some of the smaller scrap pieces. But I think it's good. It feels very big in this space, but again, it's in a small basement, so we're just doing the best with what we have, and I'm satisfied. I think if these were on the wall, it would be an even better feeling if I could have just put these on the wall, which I probably should have done that, but I didn't do it. So hopefully in my next space, I'll be able to do that. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to you in some way. I'll keep you posted on how it works and how I switch things up.